Paula and Amber from Ohio Kinship and Adoption Navigators program present on adoption public benefits, including grants and subsidies that you may qualify for with an adoption. They do go into some eligibility criteria and a lot of great details, so thank you so much to Amber and Paula for this information. And feel free to reach out to Ohio Can if you're interested in connecting with a navigator and learning more.
I'm Paula Oliver. I'm one of the statewide benefits coordinators at Ohio Can. I've been with Ohio Can now for about 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years. And then I'll hand it off to Amber to introduce herself.
Thank you, Paula. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amber Robinson, and I'm the other statewide benefits coordinator with Ohio Can. I've been with the organization going on 4 years at the end of March. Great to see some new faces and some familiar faces. And just apologizing in advance, I am starting off with a cold today, so please bear with me.
All righty. So diving right into adoption subsidies. Ohio offers 5 adoption subsidy options to support adoptive families. The 4E adoption assistance, sometimes we refer to it as AA, adoption assistance, is funded through the federal Title 4E program, and it provides financial assistance to eligible families. So building on this, the Adoption Assistant Connections program extends adoption assistance up to age 21. So for families who do not qualify for 4E assistance, the state adoption maintenance subsidy, also known as SAMS, offers state-funded support if families meet eligible criteria. So in addition to that, the non-recurring adoption expenses subsidy helps cover one-time adoption-related costs such as legal fees, home study expenses. And then lastly, we'll talk about PASS, which is the Post-Adoption Special Services Subsidy, and that provides support for post-adoption needs and is administered by the state with assistance from Connect. While PASS and AAC adoption assistance connections are state administered programs, the 4E adoption assistance, SAMS, and the non-recurring adoption expenses subsidy are managed by individual public children's services agencies at the county level. Each adoption subsidy, particularly SAMS and the 4E adoption assistance, has specific eligibility criteria that must be met. One key requirement is that the child must have a special need. In addition to this, factors such as the child's age and the length of time they were in custody also play a role in determining eligibility. These factors are essential in meeting the special needs criteria for adoption assistance, particularly under the 4E adoption assistance program.
I did want to make a quick note here because when we presented this last time, we had a couple questions about this. So with the special needs criteria for those particular programs, the special needs definition is kind of broad. So of course, meaning a child that has a disabling condition or a special need, but they also look at, like they said, age, length of time in custody. Sometimes if the child is like older age group, they may consider that. If they're like part of minority group, they'll consider that. So it's not just what one thinks when they hear special needs. There are some other conditions that they look at as well to determine eligibility under that special needs criteria. And then all the programs that we listed on that other slide, that is one of the eligibility, like the child has to have an identified special need for all the ones listed there.
And then the 4E adoption assistance is determined based on the child's special needs at the time of adoptive placement. If new needs arise later, families can request a redetermination of the subsidy amount. The eligibility is not based on conditions present at birth or when the child first entered care, but rather on the specific needs at the time of the adoption. And then 4E adoption assistance provides benefits in the form of a monthly payment and or a medical card. Some families choose to decline the monthly payment either because they feel they don't need it or they don't want to necessarily rely on the system. However, even if they opt out of that monthly payment for a zero payment amount, they can still receive the medical card as secondary insurance to cover those unexpected healthcare needs. And it is often recommended that families accept the monthly payment, even if they don't plan to use it immediately, as it can be set aside for future expenses such as college tuition or housing deposits when the child transitions to adulthood. Payments begin once all required steps are completed, and for foster parents adopting a child, they have the option to continue receiving foster care maintenance rate until finalization or switch to the adoption assistance amount during this period. Many families choose to stay on the foster care maintenance rate, as it is usually higher than the adoptive assistant payment. And then the 4E adoption subsidy generally remains in effect until the child turns 18. However, if the child has a significant mental or physical delay or a qualifying diagnosis, the subsidy can be extended until age 21. This extension is often recommended because it involves fewer redeterminations and less documentation compared to the Adoption Assistant Connections program. So families in this situation are encouraged to pursue the 4E extension when possible. And then eligibility for 4E adoption assistance is not dependent on the adoptive family's income. So no income requirement there. The funding primarily comes from the federal government, with state and local funds supplementing beyond a certain amount. International adoptions do not qualify for 4E assistance, but private adoptions may be eligible if the child, again, meets that special needs criteria. And to receive 4E adoption assistance, families must apply before finalization of the adoption, even if it's just one day before. Most counties will not proceed with an adoptive placement until the subsidy has been negotiated, meaning applications are typically submitted months in advance of finalization. There are exceptions to this rule, allowing families to apply for adoption assistance retroactively in specific cases. The first exception applies when the agency was aware of significant information about the child, such as a diagnosis, a traumatic event, or critical history, but failed to disclose it to the adoptive family. In such cases, the court automatically allows the family to apply for the subsidy after finalization. The second exception occurs if the agency did not inform the family that they had the option to apply for adoption subsidies. Public Children's Service agencies are required to educate families about all available options, including adoption, legal custody, and the different subsidy programs. Well, now that we've covered 4E adoption assistance, let's talk about adoption assistance connections to 21, or also known as AAC. It provides continued financial support for eligible youth until they turn 21. To qualify for AAC, the youth must have been adopted before turning 18, and there must have been an existing 4E AA agreement, not a SAMS agreement. So the adoption assistant must have been already existing, the agreement for the adoption assistant. Additionally, the 4E agreement must have been signed when the child was 16 or 17, and the child must have been in the custody of Ohio PCSA at that time. If these conditions are met and the adoptive parents are still supporting the child, the youth may receive continued assistance. Support does not necessarily mean the child must live at home. They could be in college, living in a dorm, or renting an apartment, as long as the parents remain financially involved. However, the youth cannot be married or serving in the military to remain eligible. Unlike some other programs, AAC is not based on family income. The subsidy amount is determined by the original 4E AA agreement. One key aspect of AAC is that eligibility must be redetermined every 6 months, meaning adoptive parents must provide documentation twice a year, confirming that, one, they are still financially supporting the young adult, and two, the youth is not married and not in the military. So if a youth loses eligibility at any point, they can reapply for AAC at any time before turning 21, as long as they meet the necessary criteria. The key to AAC eligibility is meeting at least one of the 5 qualifying criteria that will be outlined next. So for eligibility for AAC, Individuals must be engaged in secondary education, such as college or a community college, or enrolled in post-secondary or vocational education program. Alternatively, they could be participating in a program aimed at removing barriers to employment, employed part-time for at least 80 hours per month, or unable to engage in any of the listed activities due to a medical condition. If the individual is unable to participate in these activities due to a medical condition, the condition must be documented by a qualified practitioner in the relevant field. For example, a chiropractor cannot certify someone as unable to work due to a heart condition. So the practitioner must be qualified in that specific area related to the medical condition. I'd like to briefly discuss subsidy negotiation. Up until this year, the Department of Children and Youth have allowed counties to determine the subsidy negotiation process within their regions. However, DCY is now working on creating a more structured negotiation process. Their goal is to define what it means to negotiate in good faith and establish clear guidelines, both in the rules and in best practice documents, and on what the negotiation process should and shouldn't look like. So it's important to understand that subsidy negotiations can sometimes be continuous. If a benefit is denied, reduced, or if a family feels they were treated unfairly, they do have the right to request a state hearing. Mediation can be requested early in the process, and if mediation fails, the family can proceed to a state hearing. If mediation is successful, the family and agency will sign the subsidy agreement and the process will continue to move forward until finalization.
And I'll add a note here. We've had families run into various barriers when it comes to that subsidy negotiation. For example, they've been caring for a child they've adopted. Maybe their needs have increased based on their diagnoses, and they are trying to ask the county, the Children's Service Agency, to increase that benefit. We've had some counties that are more readily open to doing that, where others push back a little bit more. So we've seen across counties differences when we think about equity and families getting, submitting that request and that getting approved. We've also seen differences in, maybe a family is in the same county and, the one is getting a higher amount than the other in that negotiation. So the good thing, like Paula said, is that now the Department of Children and Youth is stepping in to support this process more so when families are denied or find that they're getting pushback from the counties when they're requesting to increase that subsidy or just that initial negotiation conversation. There's a formal process now where they can go ahead and like appeal it, kind of like when you similar to when you can appeal benefits if, you apply through like Job and Family Services. They can formally do that through the Bureau of State Hearings and get that, concern looked at, and then the determination can be made from there. Whereas previously it was just kind of like, no, we're not going to do it. And that was it. So now families have more of a formal process to get support around that if they're denied or running into barriers around it. All right.
Thank you, Amber.
Mhm.
And then the state adoption maintenance subsidy, also known as SAMS, is the route families pursue when a child is not eligible for Title IV-E adoption assistance. If a child is not eligible for Title IV-E adoption assistance, they may qualify for SAMS. However, if a child is eligible for Title IV adoption assistance, they will not be eligible for SAMS. So can't access both of them at the same time. It's one or the other. To be eligible for SAMS, there are specific requirements, including an income requirement. The child must have been placed for adoption by the county and meet at least one of the criteria for special needs. The family must also lack the resources to care for the child without financial assistance, which is often the case for families adopting. The family's gross income cannot exceed 120% of the median income for a family of the same size as determined annually by the Department of Children and Youth, who releases a procedure letter each spring before the new fiscal year begins. For example, if a family is adopting 3 children, their income must not exceed 120% of the median income for a family of 5. Additionally, the family must apply for SAMS before finalization of the adoption. And once approved, the subsidy is subject to an annual redetermination to ensure the family continues to meet eligibility requirements. If a family's income increases significantly, such as through raises or new employment, the SAM subsidy may end. This makes SAMs distinct from Title IV-E adoption assistance, which is not income dependent. So these two subsidies, SAMs and Title IV-E adoption assistance, are the primary forms of ongoing financial support for adoptive families, typically extending until the child turns 18 or age 21.
All right, so next we have the non-recurrent adoptions expense subsidy or non-recurrent adoption subsidy. It's a long title. So this one is meant to help families when they are wanting to get some reimbursement or financial support in paying for the things that are related to adoption or adopting a child. So anything that's directly related to that legal adoption of a child. Again, the child would have to have a special need, as we talked about in those first couple of slides. And so there's no income limit for this, so they're not going to want to know how much a family makes to qualify. Again, they provide direct payment for or reimburse the family for those adoption related expenses. And some examples we do have here. So placement supervision, legal fees, transportation, home studies, attorney's fees, other court costs. Maybe a family is like traveling far to go through the adoption process and they have to pay for like gas, hotels, accommodations, meals, things like that. And so, also medical exams. I think we have here home study already in here, background checks, fire inspections, well water tests, if that applies, any other paperwork they may have to get notarized, or just anything that relates to the process of adoption. And so a family can apply for this before the adoption is finalized. And then once it's finalized, they have up to 2 years to submit receipts and supporting documentation for reimbursement. And we know the cost of adoption, especially when a family is doing it on their own, can be pretty high. So unfortunately, though, the program, while it does help with some expenses, it only covers $1,000 max per child. So it's something. And then the other piece to this is that private or international adoptions are not eligible. When we say private adoptions, we mean adoptions where like a family is doing it completely on their own, like no involvement with the Children's Service Agency, and they're just getting their own attorney to help them with that process. So this is one where the family would need to be adopting a child that was previously in the custody of Children's Services. And then we do have a link here, just kind of going over more about that program. And this website is the Ohio Administrative Rules, Ohio Administrative Code. All right. And then PASS, this is one of the well-known post-adoption programs. It stands for the Post-Adoption Special Services Subsidy. This one is available to Ohio families who have adopted a child. This is the one where it's not as restrictive as the other programs, where it's not like the child has to have been in the custody of a Children's Service Agency. International adoptions are eligible as well as independent adoptions. And this specifically, though, it's not for any type of adoption, in the sense that it's only for children who have a condition or special need that existed prior to adoption, or that condition or special need is linked to something in their background, their childhood, or birth. And then when we're looking at PASS, the special need definition changes a bit. So if you remember what we talked about, special need being kind of broad for the other program, this one is very specific, in that the child would have to have, again, a condition or special need that has been diagnosed by a medical professional. And so yeah, it had to have existed, again, prior to adoption, and or is linked to their background, childhood, or birth. The condition must be related to their upbringing, experiences while mom was pregnant, or the history of the birth family. Like we've seen families apply for this, like maybe if the child has been through like a lot of trauma, and they're needing some type of therapeutic services that the family is not able to pay for, or insurance or other things like that does not cover. The only thing with PASS is that step parent adoptions are not eligible. So like I said, it's very inclusive like the other ones, but for some reason step parent adoptions are not eligible for PASS. So again, this is designed to pay for services that are not covered by other adoption subsidies. So all the others that we listed and talked about, say if a family's not eligible for it, or they're not getting it, or maybe it's not enough to cover some of those needs, PASS can step in and offer some additional financial support. Say if the child has private insurance through their parent and that's not covering it, PASS can step in, and or Medicaid, because as we noted, some of those subsidies come with Medicaid as well. Say if Medicaid's like, hey, we're not going to approve this special bed or something that the child needs due to their special need, or maybe the family needs a bigger van because they've adopted more children. It's just not enough room in the tiny car that they have. Of course, we know insurance is likely not going to cover things like that, but PASS may be able to step in and provide additional funding to make that happen. So it can cover things as well, like medical treatments not covered by insurance, mental health services like residential treatment, therapies. A lot of families we see use it for respite care as needed. And home modifications, we've had families use it for that. So if we had a family needed to like expand or do some type of renovation for their bathroom, there was something where a family needed to do something like in the yard. Like I said, we've had families to help getting like new cars, like a bigger van, things like that, medical equipment that is needed as well. And the key piece to this again is that the condition special need must have existed before the adoption or be linked to that child's past in order to qualify. Do note here, PASS does not cover educational or recreational expenses, so it can assist with medical and therapeutic needs. It can't be used to cover costs related to just like I'm thinking like a summer camp or like a recreational camp just for the child to go and just have fun, but it's not anything that is supporting like a treatment plan or anything that is accommodating that child's special need. PASS would not be able to cover. And then as far as funding, it is funded by the state. So that's where the money from PASS comes from. It's determined on a fiscal year basis. So for fiscal year for PASS, it's July 1 through June 30th of every year. The maximum amount that a family can get for PASS through one fiscal year is $10,000. However, there are certain situations where the family can request an additional or an increase up to $5,000 extra dollars, so a total of $15,000. But those are just certain situations, but families can request that. So that's like if residential treatment, the child is still in residential treatment, not coming out for a while, maybe they're needing additional funds to cover the cost for the extended stay there, PASS could step in, or any other extraordinary circumstances. And then, so yeah, like I said, 15,000 under those special circumstances, but generally $10,000. We do have a link here that goes more into the PASS information application if you're interested in applying for PASS. And we partner with the state to help families to ensure that they are submitting their application, that they've gathered all the materials and requested documentation that's needed. And so if you call Ohio Can and get connected, we can help that way. But even if you started on your own, you get linked with the Navigator with the organization that can work with you to go through that PASS application materials. And then they support you in even submitting it off to the state and corresponding with them as to the determination on that application as well. So it's not you're doing it on your own, because it can be a bit stressful to go through all of that when applying for PASS, because it's not a quick kind of filling out one paper application and you're done. It's quite a few things to fill out. And so we have a navigator that works with you to assist you and make sure that that's all sent off, and that there's a decreased likelihood that you'll get things sent back and all of that. And then next we have the Ohio Adoption Grant Program. So this is a newer program. It started in January of 2023. This is part of Governor DeWine's effort to increase support, financial support for adoption of post-adoptive families. And so this grant provides financial support for any adoption in Ohio. Families who adopt a child in Ohio receives a one-time payment of, and we have the payment amounts here, and put insert link to website. Well, that's a reminder for myself because I'm going to put it in the chat. But minimum $10,000 per child. If the family fostered the child prior to adopting them, they could get up to $15,000 per child. If that child has a special need, or categorized as special need adoption, that child could get up to $20,000, and this is per child. As far as the family adopting. So those are the payments that you could get, and then if like I said, we've had families that have had more than one child they're adopting, and they would get that standard amount per child. And this is not, we've had questions, this program is not considered taxable income, so families won't be taxed on it the following year when they file their taxes. And then these amounts are set. It's not like the other adoption subsidies where you can negotiate a higher amount, later on or anything like that. These are just set amounts that you would get one time after applying per adoptive child, just to ensure consistency and predictability for adopting families. And then we'll make sure we put that link in the chat for you all. You can apply online. It's a pretty easy to use portal that you could use to apply. You could also just do a paper application as well to submit. And then they take a couple of months, from what I've heard, to get back to you. But we've had some success stories with families actually getting the money and having no issues with it. And then they do say it in their, they have like a community user guide that you could use if it kind of is like a walkthrough that you could use as you're applying. And they do note in there like, oh, if you owe child support, they're going to take that before you see, the actual money. So just kind of like a FYI, that they take out certain things before you actually get that check. And then to qualify, here's just a few requirements here. Again, the adoption, because it's a newer program, they don't kind of go back prior to the date of it starting. So any adoption that started on or after July 1st of 2023 is eligible. Child has to be under 18. And then families have to apply for the grant within 1 year of the adoption finalization, and they have to be living in Ohio at the time that they applied. Similar to past, step-parent adoptions are not eligible for this program, but international and private adoptions can qualify. And then again, families could use this money for whatever they need it. They're not restricted to using it for kind of past things that are not covered by medical insurance or treatment, things like that. They can use it for whatever they need it to for their family and for the children. All right. So last, we're just going to wrap up here. So just wanted to encourage everyone to reach out to our program at Ohio Can. If you have any needs locating benefit resources or just resources in general, if you have any barriers, if you currently are working on accessing programs and you're running into issues with various agencies and doing so, you can reach out to us. Navigators would connect with you first, and if needed, they will connect you with me or Paula to work through some of those more complex issues or barriers. But navigators are knowledgeable in the basics of these programs as well and can provide you additional information and connect you to those resources too. So here's our phone number. We're open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 6:30, and then we have a link again to our website here. Like I said, I've seen some familiar faces that I know have been involved with our program in the past or currently. But if you're not and you're just looking to see what's out there, maybe things that you could tap into that you haven't already, feel free to give our organization a call. It's completely free. We don't ask for income, anything like that. We don't ask for insurance or anything. It's completely free for you to utilize, and you can even use it more than once if any of your needs change as well.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not, but I'm I'm just thinking of all the little in, intricate things that are involved here. It really is hard to understand the differences between this process, this path or this path to get into assistance with the adoption, both before and after. And I wonder if you guys have any areas that people are coming into conflict with that you think it might be worth a group advocating for change in. I was just thinking of some of the definitions. I know that it's pretty clear that step parents can't use this process. Then I begin to wonder if there will be barriers put in for kinship because they also are family members. And I know when that was first set up, step parents weren't because they were family members. And so I'm just wondering if there are things that you see that we ought to be conscious of looking forward to perhaps advocating for change if some of those things come up.
I would say just overall, what we see is there's a huge difference in the types of adoption subsidies benefits that are available to families who are adopting a child that has not had involvement with children's services. As you could see, the only ones that a family could get assistance with is that Ohio adoption grant, right? But that's just the one-time grant, and it doesn't include health insurance. And then pass, but again, the child would have to qualify for that, and it's not money that could be spent for whatever. It's spent specifically for, meeting whatever special need the child has. Whereas the other ones that we talked about, families are getting a monthly payment for that child until they're 18 or sometimes 21 and Medicaid. So we have seen a disparity in um, the types of support adoption families are getting, specifically in those independent, right, adoptions versus kinship. Because, with kinship, you could get the child only monthly. And there's the K gap, which is new now, where you could get the monthly and Medicaid if you have legal custody of a child. Um, Assistance in helping families even afford the cost of adoption. So as you saw, the non-recurring special services subsidy, which is that one-time kind of assistance to help pay or reimburse for the costs, there's nothing like that for a family that's trying to adopt a child. um so that's what we've seen. We I would say on average we get way more kinship specific questions, or just kinship identified kinship families that are referred to us more than adoption. But when we do get those families that have adopted or are thinking about adoption, usually the barriers are, we're trying to find a place that can support us in paying for the cost of even doing it, because we're going to be doing it on our own. And then maybe they've already done it and they weren't aware that they don't really have, financial support at the end of the day, or Medicaid. Um, Again, when it's independent, because we know with children's services, they're getting that additional support until they're 18 or 21. The child is 18 or 21. Um, I would say, as far as understanding the differences between programs, I always tell families, especially if children's services is involved in any way, prior to adoption, et cetera, it's the responsibility of children's services to inform families. Like, they have a right to know what all of their options are. Unfortunately, we see families are not being informed of that until they get to Ohio Can and they're already, in a situation, or a judge has already ordered something and they're like, wait, I was not told this. I was not given my options. So on a higher level, we look at barriers. Families are not even being told all of their options so that they can make an informed decision, that's best for their family and their circumstances. So a lot of times we see that. And like I said, as far as understanding what's out there, if children's services is involved, they're supposed to tell families, all of that. But sometimes they don't, and luckily they get to us, and we're able to inform them. But sometimes we see like a judge has already ordered something, or children's services has already worked on a plan towards something, and families are like, wait, hold on, I might have to reevaluate. And then, now they have that information, they're able to actually have that conversation with the caseworker, and you'd be surprised after that how much things change. But yeah, I would say just families not being informed uh upfront of what their options are, because a lot of times by the time they get to us, things have already happened. A lot of things have already happened.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for sharing some of your experiences and for the questions too. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much for all of the information. And yeah, for being here, for the support. We so appreciate you guys, in Ohio Can. And yes.
Okay, yeah, feel free to reach out to us at Ohio Can. Like I said, if you're having additional needs, we have a team of folks. We all work together. We have our navigators who are wonderful and very knowledgeable in more local resources. So if you're running into barriers, with housing, utilities, support needs for the children you're caring for, medical issues, just anything you can think of, don't hesitate, reach out to us. And then, like I said, as far as me and Paula, we can support if you're running into any complex barriers or issues accessing any of these benefit programs. We can step in and support you further. And we do a lot of like reaching out to other agencies on your behalf, making phone calls, all the things.